Does talking to strangers make you happier? Could ageing disgracefully help you live longer? I'm Dr. Michael Mosley, and in my Just One Long Thing podcast series, I'll be chatting to doctors and scientists. We'll be covering topics like sleep, exercise, happiness, and staying young, with each of our experts choosing a health hack they claim is the single most effective way you can improve your life. Just One Long Thing. Listen first on BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast. As we record, it's the start of the winter break in the Scottish Premiership, so it seems like a good time to pause and take stock. We're publishing mid-season report cards for all 12 top-flight teams that will tell you all you need to know about where they are and how they got there. This episode is dedicated to the side currently sitting in top spot, Celtic.
And a chance for Kyogo. How on earth did that come through to him? And he scores! Copeland Road end at Ibrox. Palma winds up the shot and scores! Well, that's about blowing the roof off here at Celtic Park. Here's Dykes and Maida with the first chance of the game and a goal! Celtic in front inside 60 seconds.
This is the Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sport Scotland.
Well, Paul John Dykes is the host of a Celtic State of Mind podcast, and Paul Lambert, former Celtic captain, they're both with us for this podcast. Chaps, how are we? Okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
I'm good, Jim.
Excellent stuff. Plenty to get through with Paul John and Paul. But before that, let's remind ourselves of Celtic's season so far.
I'm very privileged and honoured to be asked to come back.
Turnbull waits to take. Here he goes and fires it home into the bottom right corner of the net. The first Premiership goal of the season belongs to the champions. Who comes across goal? It's tapped in! Kilmarnock in front to the Smalley Watkins! Oh, is in one-on-one with the keeper to make it 6, which he does! O'Reilly into the box, is going to shoot with the right foot. Oh, it's sensational! It's utterly sensational from Matt O'Reilly!
I'm still a little bit angry, if I'm honest. I've never been so angry at half-time since I was a manager.
O'Reilly crosses the back pass! And Lagerbielke heads it home!
Those sorts of moments, the Lagerbielke moment, Scalesy man of the match in the Champions League, good moments, and we want to keep building.
Yeah, Kingsley curls it to the bottom corner. It's a peach from Stephen Kingsley! And Hearts have got a second goal at Celtic Park. Again, what a header! What a header from Liam Scales, that was! Comes to Johnston, 3-0! Greg Taylor has a great finish! Kyogo, Maida wants it, he decides to go alone! And what an outstanding goal that is! Kyogo Furuhashi with a Derby classic here!
We can have a wee bit of recovery now. We still got a lot of work to do, but we've set a standard of performance over these last numbers of weeks, and we'll be excited to get that going again when we come back.
Well, some key moments there, and just to quickly summarise Celtic's season up to this point, they're currently top of the Premiership on 54 points, 17 wins, 3 draws and 2 defeats. They began the season as reigning champions with a 4-2 home win over Ross County. Despite a positive Premiership start, they were knocked out of the League Cup by Kilmarnock in the second round in August, and they finished bottom of their Champions League group stage despite some good performances, and most notably at home to Atletico Madrid and Feyenoord. And in December, they lost back-to-back league games for the first time since 2013. That was, of course, a 2-1 defeat at Rugby Park against Kilmarnock, and then they lost at home 2-0 against Hearts. But things look to be back on track. They've won their last 4 games, including a 2-1 win over Rangers at Celtic Park, and their second victory over their Glasgow rivals this season. Well, Paul John and Paul, a lot to get through. Let's start with you, Paul Lambert. First of all, how would you sum up Celtic's season so far?
I don't think you can have too many grumbles, Jane, to be honest. I like the sit at the top of the league. That's the secret of being a Celtic player, that when you win games, you don't get a thanks for it. When you lose them, you criticise just because of the expectancy level of what happened in years and years and years ago. So I think that what the lads have done, they've got their heads down. They've lost a couple of games, so be it. but they're still sitting in a really healthy position. And yeah, you're right, the last couple of games have started to hit form again.
Paul John, would you concur with your former captain there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's always going to be disappointments if you're knocked out of a cup. You want to win every trophy. We'll get greedy that way, Jane. But I think over the piece, there's been a lot of new players coming in. We lost some quality from last season. And of course, we've replaced Ange Postecoglou with a new manager who has new ideas. And it takes time for the players to adapt to that. I think Paulo Bernardo is probably the best example of it. Here's a guy that's taken maybe 6 months to settle in, and now we're seeing the benefit of his talent. So overall, it's very good to be going into the second half of the season top of the league, which is always a priority. And you can take some positives from the Champions League as well, I think. The home performances were very good, gives us a wee bit of promise. And we're just kind of hoping now that whatever we do in the transfer window in January, and I know it's difficult, will improve the starting 11.
Well, you mentioned personnel there. Obviously, the manager was a big one coming in, albeit for his second stint. So let's talk about that now. Paul Lambert, what's your assessment of what Brendan Rodgers has done so far? Of course, in his second spell at the club, so not new to it, but following hard on the heels of a manager who was really popular and really successful in Ange Postecoglou. It's not an easy thing to do, is it?
No, it's not. But if you look at Brendan's first time, which was really successful, he done a great job when he first came in. Then he leaves. Then I think was it Lenny that took over after Brendan, and Lenny had a great spell there, and they obviously turned a little bit nasty towards the end. And Ange came in. Probably I always liked Ange's thing is like Wim Janssen's kind of tenure of he lost his first couple of games and everybody thought he was a dud, which Glasgow does. Glasgow does that to you. You get a millisecond to prove yourself up there, and if you don't do it, people think you're hopeless. So Wim and Ange's kind of tenure was really similar. Lost the first couple of games, and then all of a sudden, boom, it happened. And so taking over for Ange would never be easy. However, didn't matter if it was Brendan or somebody else. Everybody was always going to compare Ange's time to the new manager's time. But Brendan can do the Celtic job with his eyes shut, because he knows it that well, and he knows how it feels. He knows that club's all about winning, and I think he's highlighted that you don't get times a Celtic player or a Celtic manager to bed yourself in. You have to win games there, and that's the secret of it. If you can master winning games, doesn't matter how you do it. You get 60,000 people coming every week. You get a worldwide following that follow you every single week. So the duty of a Celtic player and a Celtic manager is to win. And Brendan's been brilliant for the club. He was brilliant for his first time, and he's put them in a great position again this time.
Paul John, what's your assessment of Brendan Rodgers and the job he's done so far in his second spell at the club?
I think he's put his stamp on the team. It's maybe taken a wee while longer, Jane, because we played such a style of play that had its own identity under Ange Postecoglou. And some of the big changes were things like the inverted fullbacks, Joe Hart playing with a lot of the ball at his feet, and the wingers played in a certain way that they really got the best out of Kyogo. I think Brendan Rodgers has come in and changed a few things there, and it's taken the players time to adapt. But you've just got to look at the performances of Matt O'Reilly. He's definitely improved under Brendan. Liam Scales, a lot of this is down to the players themselves, of course, but these guys have really come to the fore, and I would even throw Callum McGregor. I know he's been consistent, but I think this season, and in particular, when it really mattered against Rangers, he was outstanding, and Brendan Rodgers pinpointed his performance. So I think he's a great coach, he really is, and people talk about his man management, and I'm happy with the changes. There's been a lot of new players coming in. We knew it would take time, and I think that we do have his stamp on the team now. The last few games, we've seen us putting the opposition on the back foot early doors, and when we do that, we're at our absolute best.
You mentioned Matt O'Reilly there as a player who's impressed you, Callum McGregor as well. Paul, from your point of view, what standout players, when you think of Celtic, spring to mind?
I think Callum's the catalyst of it. I think he's the one that makes them tick, really. And I think Celtic have always had that type of player in the past, that they need somebody to dictate the game. And he's done that great. I think the next level with Callum is to consistently do it in Europe, at the highest level of the Champions League, whereas that's where you want to make your mark on it. But he's a catalyst of it. You take him out the picture, then I think it becomes a little bit more difficult, because the way he plays the game is clever, and his brain takes him into places quicker than what his legs will, because he can read the game with it. So he plays great off the back foot. He receives the ball when he's on the half turn. He looks before the ball even comes to him, which is always a great sign of a midfielder. If you make the game look easy, then you know you're a top player. It'll probably go under the radar of a lot of people because Kyogo scores a lot of the goals and things like that. But you take McGregor out the side, and I think then it becomes a little bit more difficult. But for me, he's a catalyst that makes a team play.
Paul John, I think we're starting to see some of the signings that were brought in, the likes of Navrocki. We're kind of seeing what he can do. He's getting a bit of a chance now, isn't he? Some have been a success, some maybe less so. In terms of the new signings, how do you assess their contribution?
It's been a mixed bag, I think, Jane, but when you bring in 9 players, it's going to be unlikely that they're all going to make that positive impression. I've been impressed over the piece with Palmer. I think there's a wee bit of inconsistency, but he's got time to be refined. He's been very good. Yang has shown in flashes that he might be one for the future as well. And I think in the midfield, we've seen Holm, a young player coming from Norway. He's shown signs that he might be one for the future. Bernardo's really come into his own in the last few games. And like you say, Navrocki, probably a victim of Liam Scales' success, really. I think we signed him to play alongside Carter Vickers. Big signing, 4.3 million. But in the last couple of games, he's shown us what he can do. I thought coming into that Rangers game, very difficult. He looked very composed, strong on the ball, very good distributor as well, playing passes into the wing. So a bit of a mixed bag, but because you've got a man manager in Brendan Rodgers, he'll bring the best out of guys like Bernardo and Navrocki in the second half of this season, and that's important as well.
It was interesting hearing from Paul John there, Paul, talking about the kind of different style of play and maybe how that's been affecting some of the players. Some Celtic fans think that maybe Kyogo is having a quieter time of it this season. I was just looking back at his stats from last season, from the start of the season to now. It's actually not that huge a difference really, isn't it? But it's amazing how a perception can kind of grow.
Top players always find a way to win games, and always find a way to be in the right place at the right time. You won't need to really coach top players because they understand the game knowledge and the game structure in their head. They'll know where to go. Kyogo, yeah, you're right. There's not much of a difference. But the last was an absolute gem last weekend. So he knows what the goal is. And his goal ratio, tell you what, is no bad at all. If he can do it in Europe, then I think that's his next step.
Obviously, Paul John, the transfer window is now open. In terms of positions, where does Celtic need to strengthen? Brendan Rodgers keeps talking about getting quality players in. That's quite key, isn't it?
I think it is. And also, we've got a lot of players going to the Asian Cup. Kyogo is an outstanding player, but I do think we need backup. Because if he gets injured, then he's had his problems with his shoulder. If he gets injured during that period that owes away, then we'll be struggling in that area. And I think Greg Taylor needs a challenge at left back. I thought he was brilliant against Rangers, really good. And again, against St Mirren, he was excellent. But he needs a challenge. He's not really had that. And they two areas are key. But, even on the wings, it sounds as though we're going to be in for a winger. Again, we've got 3 wingers away to the Asian Cup. And had you asked me 3 weeks ago, I would have said someone in the midfield is back up for Hatate, but Bernardo's come to the fore. So I've scored that one off the list, Jane. So I'd be happy with a striker and a left back.
Does it need to be a different kind of striker to Kyogo, Paul, do you think? We remember the days when you were playing Sutton and Henrik Larsson. They were great foil for each other, weren't they?
Yeah, and if you even go back to it, even before that, Jane, Henrik and Bratpack played well together. They played really well together. So that if you kind of get a foil and 2 lads up there that bounce off each other, then great. But Celtic play obviously one up top most times. Kyogo, yeah, is he probably the most natural finisher? Probably is. When in their time we had probably 3 or 4 lads that could notch up a lot of goals, where Celtic have got Kyogo, who they rely on for a lot of goals. All the midfield lads will chip in. So could they go for another striker? Yeah, possibly, because they are the Asian Cup's going to hit them pretty hard. So I think Brendan's not silly. He'll know what they need, and he knows it's probably not a development club. You need to get lads that can hit the ground running because it's too big. The club's too big.
Yeah, 5 players it is who are away to the Asia Cup. Hatate and Maeda, probably the 2 key players from that list. Does that fill you with a little bit of dread, Paul John?
It definitely does. I know that Maeda sometimes divides opinion, but he's that type of player, Jane, that he's such a hard worker. His defensive qualities are excellent on the wing as well. So he's going to be a huge loss. And I think Hatate, just coming back from that injury, you were looking forward to getting him some game time, and he's away. Bit of a stop-start season for a player who I thought was our best player last season. So they are the two big misses, and it's a wee bit concerning, but as Paul said, Brendan Rodgers will have all this planned in advance, and I'm pretty sure the transfers will come in with that in mind.
You're listening to the Scottish Football Podcast.
Well, finally, let's look ahead. Given what you've seen so far, Paul, what are your expectations for the rest of the season from a Celtic point of view?
It's like when I played there, you have to win. There's no a grey area to say, well, we can take 20 grand in. Brendan knows it. The club knows it themselves, that the title's the main priority. If they can win the other cup, then great. But the title's the main one. That's the one you want. And that's the one's a catalyst to get you into Champions League football, and the revenue comes into it. And if the lads can keep the form they've got at the minute, which they know that themselves, every time you put that jersey on, the weight becomes heavy, and you have to live with that expectation level of winning trophies there. So do you expect Celtic to be in the mix to win the title? Of course you do. Do you expect them to be favourites for it? Yeah, I do, because I think they're in the best place on and off the pitch. I think they're in the best place. I think the club's structure-wise is really good. It's really strong because of the success it's had in the Champions League with the revenue. They've got a top manager there who knows the game inside out. And along with the board, they'll know exactly how they want to come in. So that's why I say structure-wise, it's so important for the club to try and win the title. That's the goal, was to win that title again.
From your point of view, Paul John, as a Celtic fan looking on, how important is it that the manager is backed, not just in January, but in transfer windows to come as well?
I think it's huge. It can cause a problem, and Brendan spoke about that only when he came back. He spoke about the recruitment issues that he faced last time round. So he needs to be backed. I mean, the board will say, we have backed him, look at the amount of money we spent in the summer, and I get that, but Brendan wants players that will make an immediate impact. He's spoken about it over the last few months. I think that when it comes down to that winning mentality, Brendan Rodgers said something very interesting after the game against Rangers, Jane, talking about, he's faced 5 different Rangers managers, yet he's never failed to win the league. He's a winner. And I think that when you've got players like Kyogo, who are big game players, never ever shirk the challenge, and they come up with goals like that, even with what we have, I think Brendan would be able to get us through this season, but he will add quality, and I'll feel more confident once he gets that in as well.
Paul, you've spoken about the importance of winning the league. In terms of what constitutes a successful season for Celtic, do they also have to win, obviously the League Cup's away, but do they also have to try and win the Scottish Cup as well? Is the league enough?
Never is. It never is. And every tournament you go into with Celtic, it's even if you play tiddlywinks at Park, you've got to win. This is what separates the club from a lot of clubs, without a shadow of a doubt. It's funny, I was talking to Davey here about this, that while ago, the club, what happened in the history before it set its tone and set the standard, well, you sign for Celtic, and surely in the small print of your contract, you say at the bottom, by the way, you must win every game, or else you're going to get criticised. And if you don't give it that, you feel the wrath. So do you expect them to win the league? Yeah. Do you expect them to win the Scottish Cup? Yeah. But that's me saying that as somebody on the side looking in. It's a lot more harder than that. Because I think they'll be better players. I think they'll be a better structure, as I said before. Would I love to see them win the doubles, you want to call it? Yeah, of course I do. You want to see them get into Champions League? Yeah, of course I do. You want to see them progress at the group section? Of course. But that comes... I'm sorry, when you're saying that contract, that comes with the gig, I guess.
Yeah, Paul John, is the double on for you? And is that something that is almost a must? The league, as Paul's talked about, is a priority, but you want more than that? You want to be greedy because you've set the bar high. You've done it in the past.
I think so. You go for the league, the bread and butter, and it accesses the biggest income stream that the club has as well, obviously with the Champions League the following season. But you want to win everything. You want to win the cup. I don't mind being greedy when it comes to that. But there's one thing, there'll be no complacency. And I think that anybody watching Rangers, the biggest challengers for anything this season, will know that they're a better side, they're better organised, better structured, and they've got a decent gaffer. So there'll be absolutely no complacency. And if we win the double, I think it's a successful season, Jen.
Paul John Dykes and Paul Lambert, thank you both very much for joining the Scottish Football Podcast mid-season Celtic report card. Remember, our email address is scottishfootball@bbc.co.uk, and if there's anything you would like to get in touch with us about, then just drop us an email, and we'll have a special episode on every Premiership club throughout the winter break before we return with our regular schedule. So follow and subscribe to make sure you do not miss out on a thing. That's it from us for now. Bye-bye.
Just a quick reminder, the Behind the Goals podcast is available every Tuesday with me, Rachel Corsey, and me, Leanne Crichton. It's your one-stop shop for our take on everything that's happening in the world of football. Just head to BBC Sounds or wherever you get your podcasts and search for Behind the Goals.